Sawyer, you may continue.
Thank you. All right, and so I'm asking that defendants exhibit 21, excuse me, 19, let me just back up. Exhibits 21 be admitted,
Only exhibit
just
21?
for right now.
Defendants exhibit, I'm sorry, state.
No objection, Your Honor.
Defendants exhibit 21 is admitted.
Okay. And looking at defendants exhibit 21, would you agree that it was also on May 16th, 2021? That goes along with, looks like it's the same day.
It would appear that it's the same day.
And I'm now showing you what is State's Exhibit 7. And would you agree with me that that's on May 23rd, 2021?
Correct.
And that is a photo of the room in which Benji and Leo were staying,
Correct.
and that they both have identical beds,
Yes.
and that when we watched Hale's video, you heard why Benjamin's bed was no longer there, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and that's because he had diarrhea and it had gotten on it.
Right.
Okay. So the two boys appear to be treated equally, correct?
Objection calls for speculation, Judge.
Sustained.
I'm showing you what's been the photo number 8, and it is on, would you agree, June 4th, 2021?
Correct.
All righty. And here, would you agree with me, it's a Benji,
Yes.
and he's standing up in a car,
Yes.
and he has a blue and white striped shirt,
Yes.
and his arms are showing, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so, there's nothing, I mean, would you agree with me that by revealing his body, everybody's able to see it who would have come into contact with Benji that day, correct?
Yes.
If he's wearing this outfit.
Correct.
Okay. And State's Exhibit 9 is also from 6/4/2021. And again, that's Benji, correct?
Yes.
Same shirt.
Yes.
Showing you what State's Exhibit 10, and it's from June 6, 2021.
Yes.
And well, I didn't do anything differently, so I'm not sure what happened. But do you see this photo?
Yes.
And can you tell who it is from the photo?
Benjamin.
Okay. And were you there that day when this photo was taken?
No.
And so you have no idea what's actually happening in this photo, correct?
No.
All right. And you also don't know who else is there when this photo is taken,
Correct.
but it came from Miranda's phone?
I believe that's a.
Object calls for speculation.
Sustained, if he does not know that, that's sustained.
I'm not sure, but I believe that's the photo that they pulled from her phone.
That they pulled from her phone? Because that's the Cellbrite records that you were referring to review before you testified, correct?
Correct.
And then I'm showing you what State's Exhibit 11, and it's taken on June 9th, 2021.
Yes.
And you would agree that you see Miranda in the photo?
Yes.
As well as Mariah as the baby?
Yes.
And who's in the background?
Benjamin.
Okay. And photo number 12 is from, you would agree, 6/10/2021.
Yes.
And who is in the photo?
Benjamin and Mariah.
Okay, and can you tell if the baby's there? In the mirror?
I can't see from the.
You can't see from here? Okay. And then photo number 13 is from 6/17, correct?
Yes.
And it's all 4 kids together, right?
Yes.
And the older kids are wearing similar shirts.
Correct.
Someone took the time to coordinate them, correct?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Now, on the next photo, photo number 14, June 21st, 2021, showing you that photo. And this is Benji, right?
Yes.
Okay, you weren't there when this photo was taken.
No.
And you don't know if Brandon was there when this photo was taken, correct?
Correct.
You don't know who was there when this photo was taken.
No.
And you don't know what's going on before or after this photo was taken, do you?
No.
Now, showing you what's been marked, or is indicating photo 15, and it's from, would you agree, June 25th, 2021?
Yes.
And it's a photo of Benji.
Yes.
He's sitting at a dinner table,
Correct.
and he has a drink in front of him, correct?
Right.
And it looks like it, a place to eat, correct?
I have.
Oh, it looks like IHOP, okay. And what, do you see the bottle in the picture? This handle right here?
Yeah. I'm not sure if it's a bottle, but I see the handle. Yes.
Okay. Did you see what he was drinking out of on 7/20/21 when I asked you about the milk?
Yes.
Okay. And it's similar in appearance, would you agree?
It was a red object, yeah, similar to that, yes.
Okay. And I'm showing you photo 16 from, you would agree, July 7th, 2021.
Yes.
And now we're a few days difference, week or so, maybe 2, and he's again wearing that same tank top that you saw in the previous photo, correct?
Yes.
All right. And you also saw Brandon Jr. in that picture,
Yes.
correct? Now I'm showing you what's been marked as 17, photo 17, and it came from July 24th, 2021.
Yes.
And this is a, would you agree with me, a picture of Benji, Leo, and Miranda's sister?
Yes.
Okay. And he's smiling and happy.
He's smiling.
You see his teeth?
Correct.
Yeah. And you see photo number 18. Would you agree it came from July 26, 2021?
Yes.
And now in this photo, you see Leo and Benji, correct?
Yes.
And they're 2 years apart?
I don't remember Leo's age.
Okay. I'll have to check. And he has on clean, new tennies, or they appear to be pretty new.
He has some shoes, yes.
And a nice outfit.
Object to relevance.
It goes to care and clothing.
Overruled. You can answer, sir.
Yes.
Has his hair done as well?
Yes.
And that next photo is on night number 19, July 26, 2021. And this is just Benji by himself, right?
Correct.
And this is 6 days after you saw him.
Yes.
And then number 20 is would you agree, is from July 30th, 2021?
Yes.
And it shows Benji.
Yes.
Now it looks like he has had a haircut
Yes.
since the last photo. Then photo number 21 is from July 31st, and it is, would you agree?
Yes.
And I can't enlarge it. Oh, maybe I can. Nope. Okay. And it's a Benji,
Yes.
right? And it appears to be, from the photo, it says it's an SAISD yearbook best smile picture, right?
Yes.
Okay. And he's standing in the frame. And so this, I think, what is SAISD? Is that San Antonio Independent School District?
Correct.
So it's a public forum
Yes.
that he's standing in. And he has his no sleeves on, correct?
Yes.
He has that same or a similar shirt with stripes.
Yes.
And it's a tank top
Yes.
and shorts
Yes.
and different tennis shoes, correct?
Yes.
And now I'm showing you photo 22 from, would you agree, August 1st, 2021?
Yes.
Okay. And here, you would agree that Benji's eating
Yes.
cake?
Yes.
Okay. Now, number 23, photo number 23 came from August 3rd, 2021. Would you agree?
Yes.
And now, can you tell what's going on in this picture?
No. Looks like you might be in a vehicle.
Okay. And what kind of shirt is he wearing?
Tank top.
Okay. And he has shoes on.
Yes.
Okay. They appear to be new-ish.
Right.
Now we're on photo number 24, August 9th, 2021, correct?
Yes.
And this is a picture of, would you agree, Leo on the right and Benji on the left?
Yes.
Okay. And COVID's going on?
It's 2021, so I'm sure people were still wearing masks back then.
Okay. And then this is photo number 25. And would you agree it comes from August 11th, 2021?
Yes.
And in this photo, it appears, would you agree with me, that there's a diaper?
Yes.
And that Benji has put his hand in the diaper.
Yes.
And what is normally contained in diapers?
Either poop or pee.
And would, in your experience, does that look like that's poop on his hand?
It could be.
And in order to have poop, do you have to have food consumed?
Yes and no. Yeah. You could also drink liquid substance, but yeah.
Okay, but you'd have to have consumed something.
Correct.
And you would agree with me from the photo, it doesn't look like it's diarrhea, correct?
I'm gonna reject
I can't
culture
tell.
speculation.
That's sustained.
Now, I'm showing you what's photo number 26 from 8/14/2021. Would you agree?
Yes.
And this is a photo of Leo, Benji, and Brandon, correct?
Yes.
Brandon Jr. And they're eating at the table.
Yes.
And they're all together.
Yes.
And they all have water or a liquid to drink.
There's liquid substances on the table, yes.
And then okay, number 27 is, now let me back up. On 26, that was at 9:51 a.m., correct?
From what it shows there, yes.
Yeah. And then underneath it says 10:33:28 on the photo number 27.
Yes.
So from the same day. And this is Benji?
Yes.
Okay. This is the same, this is at 10:33 a.m., correct, on photo number 27?
Yes.
And then photo number 28 is at 10:33 as well?
Yes.
Okay. And so same time, but two different photos, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And are you familiar with filters on phones and lighting?
No.
On your iPhone, does it have ways that you can take pictures differently?
Yes.
Okay. And so you can't say whether or not someone, how they took this picture, whether a filter was used or anything like that.
No, I'm
correct?
gonna object to relevance, Judge. This isn't an iPhone.
You may answer.
No, I don't.
And so I'm showing you photo number 29, and it is from that same August 14th, now at 1:44 in the afternoon, correct?
Yes.
And we see Benji, and he's drinking water.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
And his arms are up.
Correct.
This is August 16th now. We're 2 days later, 11:55 in the morning, and for photo number 31, right?
Yes.
And who is this?
Miranda, Leo, and Benji.
Okay. And so they're all together. He's with his brother. And then we jump back, and it looks like this goes backwards in time on photo number, oh, maybe there's just one at the bottom. So I think this is a duplicate, but let's make sure. So it says
It is true.
it's a duplicate?
There's
Okay.
a tag on its one. That's the tag.
Okay. All right. So would you agree with me? Well, at this point, I'm asking you to look at Defendant's Exhibit 19. And do you recognize the people in that photo?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm Defendant's Exhibit number 20. Do you recognize the people in those photos?
Yes.
And earlier today, when you reviewed the Cellbrite report, can you tell me what date the, Defendant's Exhibit 19 correlates with?
Judge, I'm going to object questioning because we haven't established what 21A is, but we would not object to the admission of 19 and 20.
I think 21A was established as the Cellbrite report, but is not being offered. And Ms. Sawyers, are you seeking to admit 19 and 20?
Yes, but I'm trying to establish the dates that correlate with them.
Okay. I'll go ahead and admit 19 and 20. The state doesn't have an objection, but you can still you can still question on it.
Yes, so, yes, the date here says 4/9/2021.
Okay, so on Defendant's Exhibit 19, it's in April of 2021, and then on Defendant's Exhibit 20, can you reference the Cellbrite report, and what date was that photo taken?
April 18th, 2021.
Okay. All right. And so, at this time, Your Honor, we need to maybe how would I change it?
Just switch over to source to .cam. This is between PC and .cam. Just in source.
All right. So I'm showing you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 19. And you would agree that all three boys are together
Yes,
and they're eating food.
yes,
And then I'm showing you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 20. And I don't know about you, it's kind of hard. Can you see that photo?
yes.
Okay, and who is at the bottom of the photo?
Miranda,
Okay, and what are they doing?
eating?
And everyone seems to have food in front of them, correct?
Yes,
Okay, Benji's not off by himself eating?
no,
Okay. And then showing you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 21, as you can see there. Let me pull it down. And you would agree that this photo is what it coordinates with that other May 16th photo where Benji was sitting at the table, right?
right,
And now, while the state didn't include it in there, there's food with him,
I'm
right?
going to object to sidebar, Judge.
Sustained.
Move to strike.
Please refrain from the sidebar.
So, but there's food in front of Benji.
correct,
And you haven't reviewed all of the Cellbrite, correct? So you're unaware of how many other photos might contain Benji with food, right?
correct,
Because you've only been allowed to review the photos that the state provided to you, correct?
yes,
Now, at this time, Your Honor, may I approach again?
Yes.
Okay, I'm showing you photos, marked Defendant's Exhibit 23 through 31. And do you recognize those from the July 20th, 2021 welfare check?
it looks like it's their living room.
And so are those accurate representations of what you saw that day?
Yes,
And I'm considering to the state and asking the 20 through 30, the admitted,
I have 23 through 31.
23 through 31, thank you.
22.
No objection.
And just to be clear, Ms. Sawyers, there has been no defense 22 that's been offered, correct?
That's correct, not yet.
So defense 23 through 31 inclusive are admitted will be published.
Thank you. All right, so. I just need to make sure the jury is not, they're able to see it. I don't want to, there you go. Okay. So, this is Defendant's Exhibit 23, and you would agree this is the living room as you walked in on July 20th, 21, unannounced.
Correct.
Okay. And this is just a Defendant's Exhibit 24. It's just a slightly different angle of that same sofa,
Yes.
correct? And everything looks clean and orderly.
Yes.
And then Defendant's Exhibit 25 is a photo, would you agree, of the kitchen, right?
Yes.
And there's a locking mechanism that's on the refrigerator right up top.
Yes.
And not just on top, but also there's a second one on the freezer portion of it.
Yes.
Okay, and both of those were unlocked.
Yes.
And then this is Defendant's Exhibit 26. And you would agree with me that things are kept in an orderly fashion.
Yes.
With the shoes, right? The
Yes.
bag. This is Defendant's Exhibit 27 of their master bedroom, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and this is a month before, almost, you will be there on August 7th, like, you're gonna be there on August 17th, 2021, correct?
Yes.
As well. And you would agree with me that at that time, there's gonna be a crib there.
I don't recall. I have to see the video.
Okay.
Yes.
But in any event, bed's made, right?
Yes.
But, was this laundry on the bed, or do you recall?
No.
But the bed's made,
Yes.
and then Defendant's Exhibit 28, again, when y'all show up, on the July 20th, 2021, you saw that there were posters and educational posters on the wall.
Yes.
Now, showing you what has been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 31, and it's 31 here, and this is Benji, correct?
Yes.
Has a smile on his face,
Yes.
and this is a Defendant's Exhibit 30. This is a close-up of his muscle on his arm when he was asked in the video to do his muscle, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then here is Defendant's Exhibit 29, and this is a close-up of his face that day, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you can see that there's no redness in his eyes, in the eyeball, correct?
Yes.
The eyeballs themselves do not appear to be damaged.
No.
Okay. And again, he's smiling.
He's smiling in the photo, correct?
Right, and at this time, Okay. Now, at this time, Your Honor, I am seeking to admit State's Exhibit 75.
Any approach?
Yes, please. Continue, please.
And during the break, Officer Perez, were you able to view State's Exhibit 75?
Yes.
And on there, did you see 7 videos?
Benji, yes.
And they're also contain images of Benji?
Yes.
And so you recognize it to be Benji,
Yes.
correct? And at this time, Your Honor, I move to admit State's Exhibit 75.
No objection.
State's Exhibit 75 is admitted, may be published.
Now, would you agree with me that the date that these were created was on August 17th, 2021, the date that Benji passes?
That's the day, yes.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. And gonna play for you. May I publish?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna play for you number 5, video number 5. Okay. Now, is this Benji?
Yes.
And I'm gonna back up to 5 seconds. And do you see the image on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. I'm showing you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 22. Do you recognize that to be the same image up on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. At this time, Your Honor, I am just submitting a photo of what's on the screen and asking that it be admitted to Defendant's
22.
Exhibit 22.
No objection, Judge.
Okay.
Defense Exhibit 22 is admitted and may be published.
Thank you. Oh. Just about my day. Okay, and I'm showing you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 22, and you would agree that that's the same image that you saw on the screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay, now I'm going to show you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 32, and would you agree with me that that's just a paper copy of the same photo that we saw from State's Exhibit 76, photo 8, is that the same photo?
Yes.
And that photo came from June 4th of 2021, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And at this time, I am just asking to admit Defendant's Exhibit 32 after showing it to the state.
No objection. I believe it's already admitted.
It is, it's just a paper copy, Your Honor.
Defense Exhibit 32 is admitted and may be published.
Now I'm showing you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 32, and you would agree this is the same photo that was in State's Exhibit 76, photo 8.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Now, in your video, you would agree with me that there's a portion. Hold on one second. Are these all the? the videos that have been admitted?
It's the bottom of the other file.
This one. All right, so on July 20th, 2021, you had Officer Taylor there that was with you, correct?
Yes.
And he saw things that, or observed things that you didn't observe. Is that fair? Y'all weren't together the entire time, correct?
Right.
Okay. And so, at this stage, I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 97 and admitted, and it is, excuse me, State's Exhibit 99, which is Officer Taylor's body-worn camera. And I'm going to bring your attention to 54 minutes in. At 54:25, I'm stopping the video. Did you see Miranda go and grab food and hand it to Benji?
Yes.
Okay, and Benji is standing right behind the chair at 55 minutes and 12 seconds, and he's still eating, correct?
Yes.
Got any questions about anything?
Hey, can I take those oranges? Thank you.
Finally going around here.
When it rains, mosquitoes will stay right there. Under it, like 5 and big one out, small ones are.
Yeah, they said that they did a sample study on the south side from west outliers.
That's great. That's
ask Benji if he wanted some milk.
Yes.
What's in your chair or what? What's in your chair?
You want this? You want this?
And did you just, I'm stopping at 57 minutes and 4 seconds, did you see Miranda just walk across the screen with the milk in her hand?
Yes.
At 58:03, and you've now entered the screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so I'm going to now take out Officer Taylor's and put in yours and pick up right where you walk in.
Okay.
So I'm showing you what's been marked as States Exhibit 97, and I'm fast forwarding to minute 50. Um, 50 minutes and as close to 13 seconds as I can get.
Yeah, I'll let them know what you're gonna, why you're taking photos or, based on the document. So, because of the nature of the call, I have to generate a case. So I also call my detective and explain to me everything I've observed and everything y'all explain to me, okay? I'm gonna do what we call an information report, documenting what happened. If you create my chicken scratcher, this is gonna be the case number, okay? And then my self-badge number, and the number of my substation. Okay, so this is a report, there's an information report. The detective that we have here, he's gonna snap photos, just snapping the photos of the department, how y'all have it clean, how y'all have some safety measurements in place, how y'all have food. Okay, so, and then of course, these are fine. He's gonna take photos of Benjamin, okay? And it's just a procedure thing. It's not anything criminal at this point, okay?
I don't see anything.
At this point right now, okay? Everything's consistent, kind of like with whatever behavior issues that he might have. But definitely make that appointment on May 27th.
Because I had him go.
Brandon, stop. I'm trying to talk.
And then, just by I have to notify CPS today so that have to notify them, so they'll make contact with y'all, and then, whatever they're pending their investigation, but I just have to notify them on my, I just wanna let y'all know, see how my head is up, okay? So don't try to avoid them.
Yeah, of course not. Yeah. It's just something I've never had to deal with. That's
No, yeah,
I've never had to deal with. Besides with their moms, that's all.
But I'm gonna explain to them everything the breaks down to the detective, and then hopefully, that'll be the end of it. But definitely keep documentation of everything I do. Any future injuries that he sustained that you've done to himself, try to take him to the hospital and get him checked. That way, you have some
And I'm taking him to my, I was ready planning to,
If you decide to take him to the hospital, take that case number with you, because when they see him, they're gonna think the worst, okay? That way the officers, if they do call the police, they'll yeah. Yes.
because he has problems.
Yeah.
He's already gone to the council. Because I have a video of him, I'm trying to find it right now. I have a video of him where he's like saying, y'all, like, he has this deceased aunt. And he's like, she's talking this about me, and she's just like,
Who is that?
I know.
Brian?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have this video and he's over here punching his head, and like the kids are seeing, so everyone was like, what he's seen or what, and I video him, and I showed the behavior.
Is he diagnosed with anything?
He has autism, like not autism, but like he's slow in learning,
Okay.
and he has speech problems,
Okay.
and
Not diagnosed with
he's
that.
not
Not officially autism.
no.
Does he have any speech impediment, like as far as
A little bit that I noticed. Like like we try to talk to him, right? Like they're like, Benji, why do you do this to yourself? Why do you want to hurt yourself? And he just says because. That's all we get out of it.
Other than that, he talks very fine.
So I think that's what the detective's taking photos for, it's down the house, things like that. You may ask you to open up your pantry, so food y'all have, things like that. Again, when the CPS comes out there, as possible, and keep all that documentation from, if you contact a hospital by phone or a clinic by phone, someone says you, here's that way you can keep a log of all your points that you have.
And then that's after I see that, that's when I took him to because he was talking back to me. He was talking back to me. But once I tried it, that's whenever I see I tried to get him.
And she goes,
Yeah, for sure. But he does have one August 27th. They sent him things.
It's just hard to compare, they're gonna work together and sit each other for appointments and stuff like that, and they drop it on the phone. So we send it to your email, confirmation of it, and you forward it to him. Picture, and put it on your calendar.
Definitely, I'll try to go seek any kind of medical help for him next week, and so we're gonna have they will call us. So just keep that handy and say it's already documented.
Yes, sir. Sure you get the documents, paperwork, I want to take pictures of it, like that. Put it on the phone, and you
just send it to me.
So like I said, he's in snap photos, they're gonna stand by real quick. Yeah, I'm just gonna do the information report.
Can I start putting them to bed? Yeah.
Okay, I'm stopping at 5622. Do you see that Brandon now has the milk bottle?
Yes.
That's one more one.
We just need to take photos, we can start with that, we just need to take photos. You would say, well, I'm gonna cost you. You know, that's a
refill in the bottle.
We're gonna have monster, the salt, and all this.
Alright.
And I'm stopping the video at 56:59. So, you've watched all the video clips with me. Would you agree that each of the video clips that we did show captured what each of the officers were doing that day?
Yes.
I'll make sure that it's on a break.
So, in the very first video that you were speaking, or second video that you guys seen through the state, you were speaking with that caller, right? The person called in for the welfare check.
Yes.
And you agreed with, that you made the statement that they were not trying to hide from us, which is a good sign.
At the time, yes.
Objection, non-responsive.
Sustained.
Did you say on 7/20/2021 that it was a good sign because they were not hiding from y'all?
Yes.
Okay, they were open and cooperative, correct?
That's what I said, yes.
I pass the witness.
Nothing further, Judge. We would ask him to be excused.
Is he subject to recall?
We would ask him subject to recall.
Officer, you are done for the day. I thank you for your time. You are subject to recall, so please keep in contact with the state and remember that the rule has been invoked.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Please go ahead.
Your Honor. Good afternoon, Dr. Molina.
Good afternoon.
Dr. Molina, how are you employed?
I'm Chief Medical Examiner at the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office.
Okay. And so I want to first talk about your credentials in order to become the Chief Medical Examiner at the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office. Let's talk about your education first. Do you have an undergraduate degree?
Yes,
And what is your undergraduate degree in?
mathematics.
Interesting choice. Where did you get your undergraduate degree from?
The University of Texas at Austin.
And after your undergraduate degree, did you complete further education?
Yes.
Where at?
I attended and graduated from the University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio with a medical degree. It's been now renamed UT Health.
And what year did you graduate with your undergraduate degree?
1994.
And did you go immediately into medical school?
Yes.
And what year did you graduate from the University of Texas Health Science Center, San Antonio, now known as UT Health?
1998.
And once you graduated from medical school, did you have any further education or training?
Yes.
And what was that?
I completed an internship in family medicine at the University of Arkansas in Fort Smith, Arkansas. I then returned to San Antonio to complete residency training in anatomic and clinical pathology and a fellowship training in forensic pathology.
So, first talking about your time in the, your first fellowship or the internship?
My internship?
Yes. Was that where again?
That was in family medicine at the University of Arkansas in Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Okay. And how long was that?
I was there approximately a year and a half.
And then after that year and a half, did you come directly to San Antonio?
I spent some time working as a private practice physician before starting my residency in pathology.
And so how long were you in clinical practice?
I actually continued to be in clinical practice while I completed my residency in pathology. So I was in clinical practice from 1998 to approximately 2004.
So 6 years?
About.
Okay. That's the one time I'll get the math right. So what year did you start your residency here? I'm sorry, your fellowship here.
2003.
And again, what was that in?
My fellowship was in forensic pathology.
And what is forensic pathology?
So the easiest way to talk about forensic pathology is to first start with anatomic and clinical pathology. Pathology is the study of disease, essentially. So anatomic pathology being the study of disease in tissue. So say if you go to a surgeon, if you go to the doctor because you have a lump, a mass somewhere, a surgeon might remove that tissue and give it to a pathologist. And the pathologist would look at the tissue grossly, meaning exactly as it came out of the body, as well as under a microscope to determine whether or not that tissue was, say, cancer. A clinical pathologist does much the same thing, but deals with laboratory tests. So if you go to the doctor and say, have a blood test done to see if you're anemic, or maybe a throat culture, those laboratory tests are overseen and interpreted by a clinical pathologist. Forensic pathology takes both of those and applies them to the study and investigation of death and why people die. So in essence, they perform autopsy examinations and death investigations to determine a cause and a manner of death.
So, when did you finish your fellowship in forensic pathology?
2004.
And then the anatomical and clinical pathology was when?
2003.
Okay. So after you've completed the fellowship in forensic pathology, what did you do after that?
I stayed on staff at the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office.
And when you first started, or after you completed your fellowship in forensic pathology, what was your role at the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office?
I was a medical examiner.
And is there a hierarchy among medical examiners within the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office?
Yes.
And what is that hierarchy?
At the office from the medical examiners, we have medical examiners, then we have a deputy chief medical examiner, and we have a chief medical examiner.
And so, how long were you a medical examiner? What years roughly?
I believe I promoted to deputy chief medical examiner in 2007.
And then, how long were you the deputy chief medical examiner?
I was promoted to chief medical examiner in 2020.
So 13 years as a deputy chief?
About, yes.
And when you were deputy chief medical examiner, who was the medical examiner at that time? The chief medical examiner at that time?
I was deputy chief under Dr. Randall Frost.
And currently, again, you are the chief medical examiner for the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office, right?
Correct.
And you've held that position since 2020?
Correct.
Okay. Do you hold any board certifications?
Yes.
And what board certifications do you hold?
I am board certified by the American Board of Pathology in anatomic, clinical, and forensic pathology.
And when did you receive those board certifications?
Anatomic and clinical in 2004, and forensics in 2005. It's been a minute, sorry.
Okay. As far as other roles that you might have, do you sit on any type of board or hold any other positions within the medical community?
I am a professor in the Department of Pathology at the UT Health Medical School here in San Antonio. And I am the editor-in-chief of the American Journal of Forensic Medicine and Pathology.
And what is the American Journal of Forensic Medicine and Pathology?
It is the foremost forensic medical journal in the United States, but also in the world. It is one of the only journals dedicated purely to forensic medicine and pathology.
Have you been published before?
Yes.
Have you written your own textbook?
Yes.
And what is the subject matter of the textbook in which you've written?
I've actually written 2 texts, a handbook of forensic toxicology and co-authored a DeMaio's forensic pathology textbook.
And who is DeMaio?
Dr. Vincent DeMaio was my chief when I trained and originally started with the office. He is a foremost forensic pathologist here in San Antonio, but world-renowned. The name of our building is actually the Vincent DeMaio Forensic Science Center.
And you co-authored that textbook with him?
Yes.
And what is the intended audience of that textbook?
That text is written for forensic pathologists, for anyone who's interested in forensic pathology.
And in that textbook, does it include a chapter on starvation and hydration?
I believe, yes, there's a chapter on dehydration and starvation.
So, I know we briefly touched on it, but what is the role of a forensic pathologist?
So a forensic pathologist is a medical doctor who again performs death investigations and autopsy examinations to determine a cause and a manner of death.
Do they differ than most other physicians as it relates to their patient base?
Forensic pathologists are the only physicians trained in essentially the diagnosis of death, if you will, not necessarily diagnosing death, but in diagnosing how and why someone died. In fact, they're the only physicians, medical examiners are the only physicians by law allowed to certify deaths as non-natural in the state of Texas.
So, I want to talk about what is an autopsy?
An autopsy is essentially looking at a body. It's looking at the outside of the body, looking at the inside of the body, performing any necessary tests on tissues or fluids from the body, as well as looking at medical records, investigative information, and all of that to determine a cause and a manner of death.
And by law in Bexar County specifically, or in Texas generally, who performs autopsies?
So autopsies are performed by physicians. In the state of Texas, there is a law that mandates medical examiners. So larger counties, those counties with more than 2 million people, can have medical examiners, although smaller counties are allowed to. If you establish a medical examiner's office, the medical examiner should be a physician trained in forensic pathology, and the medical examiner is then tasked by law, as mandated in the state of Texas, to investigate certain types of deaths.
And what determines whether somebody gets an autopsy or a person who's been deceased needs to undergo an autopsy versus doesn't need to undergo an autopsy?
So autopsy is kind of a broad term. Most people think of the autopsy as of what we would call a complete autopsy, of looking at the outside and the inside of a body. But death investigations can consist of simply reviewing medical records. They could consist of looking at only the outside of the body. They could consist of looking at the outside, the inside, the medical records, do all the testing, right? So there's different elements to that. What type of examination is performed is based on the physician's experience and knowledge as to what is necessary. In general, suspicious or potential deaths due to the results of someone else's actions, say homicides, usually get autopsy. and deaths where we don't know why they're dead. Sometimes deaths fall under our jurisdiction where we actually know why the person may have died. Maybe they were in a car accident and they were in the hospital for some time, right? But deaths where we have no idea what happened, those would clearly get an autopsy.
And you briefly touched on this, but what is the purpose of doing the autopsy?
The autopsy is done mainly, again, to determine a cause and a manner of death, but also to determine if there's any injuries present, to what extent those injuries may have contributed to death. Is there any drugs or toxicities present? Any natural disease? Anything, again, that not only may have caused, but contributed to the death.
So you mentioned cause and manner of death, and I want to make the distinction between the two. First, I want to talk about manner of death. What does that mean?
The manner of death is the circumstances by which the death came about. By law, this is an epidemiologic term, and so by law, there are 5 manners of death: natural, accident, homicide, suicide, and undetermined. Those are the only 5 that we're allowed to use by law. And again, it just is the circumstances of how that death came about.
And cause of death, what is that?
The cause of death is the reason that the person is deceased. So this could be, say, breast cancer, or heart attack, or gunshot wound. These are the actual, what we call physiologic derangement that led to the person's death.
So you described the kind of the different types of complete versus, I don't want to say partial, but the other types of autopsies you described. Like talking about the complete, I want to talk about a complete autopsy. Is it just a physical examination of the body, meaning looking at the body externally and internally?
So a full death investigation, a full autopsy, should consist of review of all investigative and circumstantial information, which includes medical records, investigative information potentially from law enforcement or witnesses, as well as the examination, as well as any additional tests that are performed, and any other information that could potentially assist in determining that cause and that manner of death.
So, we're talking about the full autopsy. When a body comes into the medical examiner's office and it's determined that a full autopsy is needed, what happens first?
Well, the first thing that actually happens is the death is reported to our office. We have medical investigators who work for our office. Our office is independent of law enforcement or the prosecutors or any other office. We are an independent office, and our medical investigators work for us. And they gather any information about the circumstances of death. If the body is still at the scene, they'll even go to the scene, take possession of the body, take photographs of the scene, and document the scene. If the body's at the hospital, they'll talk to hospital staff to find the circumstances of death, and we'll get the body from the hospital. So our examination, the physician's examination, starts with reviewing that report, reviewing the information that the investigators have already obtained for us, those photographs, that background information, so we can determine what type of examination needs to be performed. Then we'll perform the examination, and we'll determine if any additional testing is needed, or if any additional information is needed. If additional information is needed, we'll again go back to our investigators and ask them to obtain that information for us. Perhaps it's medical records, perhaps it's interviewing witnesses, perhaps it's talking to law enforcement. We gather all of the information that we need until we can get to the determination of the cause and the manner of death.
So this process, this autopsy, talking about not just the physical examination of the body, but the investigation of the surrounding circumstances, does this happen in a day?
Sometimes the death might be very straightforward. It also might take much longer.
As far as the investigation is concerned, is it a matter of you've reached a conclusion and you're working backwards, or you've gathered information to reach the conclusion?
So we approach the autopsy just like any physician approaches their patient, right? So when you go to see your doctor, usually the first thing your doctor asks you is, what brings you in today, right? Since we can't ask our patients, that's that background information we have, right? It helps us to decide what type of examination we do. But then we do the examination. And we have to kind of put those two together. So we don't say, oh, the examination says it must be a gunshot wound, therefore it's a gunshot wound, right? We look at the investigation, it says it's a gunshot wound, and then we look at the body and we say, but it's a stab wound, right? So we have to have both pieces of information. So it doesn't go one direction. It's not that the investigation tells us what the cause of death is. It's our examination tells us the cause of death when we've done our full investigation. But we still have to use those pieces of information that we're given.
So this process of the autopsy and the death investigation, did you complete that on an individual by the name of Benjamin Cervera?
Yes.
And do you recall when he was brought to the Bexar County Medical Examiner's office? I should ask this question first. Did you complete an autopsy report in this case?
Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Molina, I'm going to show you what is marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit number 101. Do you recognize this document?
Yes.
And what do you recognize it to be?
It is a copy of the autopsy report on Benjamin Cervera, Bexar County case number 2021-2425, less the last page, which was a chart accompanying the autopsy report.
Okay. So this is the full autopsy report minus the one chart that you mentioned, which we'll discuss later. But it's the complete record minus that chart, correct?
It's the complete report, yes.
Okay,
Minus the chart.
I'm sorry. Thank you for correcting. And are these autopsy reports kept in the ordinary course of business of the Bexar County Medical Examiner's office?
Yes.
And that report, the entries, are they made by a person who has knowledge about the items that are contained in it?
Yes.
And are those entries made at the time in which the entries are made? Are those entries made at or near the time about the event in which they're referring to?
Yes.
And Your Honor, at this time, the state would move to admit State's Exhibit 101, and I'm going to tender to defense for objections, if any, and it's previously tendered in discovery.
State's Exhibit 101 is admitted and may be published.
I'm sorry. You have permission to read it. Dr. Molina, as it relates to Benjamin Cervera, what did you determine to be his manner of death?
Homicide.
And what did you determine to be possible?
Starvation.
I want to talk about first your investigation in this case. As it relates to, and again, I'm talking about the part of your autopsy that is not inclusive of the examination of the body. Did you complete a death investigation as it relates to Benjamin Cervera?
Yes.
And what did that include?
That included, as we discussed, obtaining the background information, the circumstances of death from the hospital where he died, as well as gathering additional information, including all medical records related to Benjamin Cervera during his lifetime.
And where, if you need to refer to, do you need a copy of your investigation report?
No, I haven't.
Can you tell the jury what medical records you reviewed as it relates to Benjamin Cervera?
His birth records, you want the names of the hospitals? Okay. His birth records from Metro Methodist Hospital. His pediatric records from essentially infancy from Communicare, multiple records from the Children's Hospital of San Antonio, records from Northeast Baptist Hospital, pediatrician records from Luis Lopez, an emergency room visit from the Pearl ER, physician visit with San Antonio ENT, terminal records from the Children's Hospital of San Antonio, I apologize, I'm just making sure that we've listed all of them. And I don't know if I mentioned Baptist Hospital, but emergency records from Baptist Medical Hospital as well.
How were you able to determine what facilities Benjamin Cervera had been seen at during his lifetime?
We contacted his insurance company and asked for all physician visits that had been filed under his insurance. Luckily, he'd had the same insurance coverage since birth.
So I'm going to go through his records. First, I want to talk about State's Exhibit number 102. What facility do those records appear to be from?
Assuming they're all from the same facility, they're from the Christus Santa Rosa, which is the Children's Hospital of San Antonio.
And do those records relate to Benjamin Cervera with a date of birth of September 28th of 2016?
Again, not looking at every single page in here, but yes.
And if you could look at the business record affidavit in front, actually on the cover, how many pages does this purport to include?
I believe that says 390.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 103. What facility does this appear to be from?
Communicare?
And Communicare, again, was the facility in which Benjamin attended or visited during the beginning part of his life.
Correct. It's the physician. So it's not a hospital. It's a clinic where he was receiving his care.
Okay.
During his infancy, yes.
And how many pages are included in this record?
78.
And if you could look briefly, does this appear to be for Benjamin Cervera with a date of birth of September 28th of 2016?
Yes.
I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 104. What facility does that appear to be from?
Baptist Health System.
And Baptist is one of those facilities that you listed that you received records from?
Yes.
And how many pages does that purport to be?
69.
And does this appear to be relating to Benjamin Cervera with a date of birth of September 28th of 2016?
Yes.
I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 105. What facility does that appear to be from?
Methodist Hospital System.
And how many pages does this purport to be?
497.
Okay. And does these appear to relate to Benjamin Cervera with a date of birth of September 28th of 2016?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 106. What facility does this purport to be from?
Communicare.
And how many pages does it appear to be?
This is 8 pages, and I apologize. This is Little Buddies, which is the Luis Lopez. I refer to as Luis Lopez, but it's Little Buddies, which is also part of Communicare.
Okay. And again, does this appear to be related to Benjamin Cervera with a date of birth of September 28th of 2016?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 107. What facility does this purport to be from?
The emergency clinic at the Pearl.
And how many pages is it?
12.
And does this relate to Benjamin Cervera with a date of birth of September 28th of 2016?
Yes.
State's Exhibit 108. Where's State's Exhibit? What facility are these records related to?
The San Antonio ENT.
And how many pages?
6.
And do they appear to be related to Benjamin Cervera with a date of birth of September 28th of 2016?
Yes.
And then finally, State's Exhibit number 109. According to the business record affidavit, where are these records from?
Texas Medicaid and Healthcare Partnership.
Okay, and as it relates to Benjamin Cervera, when you requested his claims from his insurance company, were you aware of what insurance company or provider he was covered by?
Yes.
And what was that?
Medicaid.
And do these records appear to be related to Benjamin Cervera?
Yes.
And at this time, the state would move to admit State's Exhibits 102 through 109, and I can tender to defense for inspection and as previously tendered in discovery. This is the photographs. I'm taking so that's truly not. There's never. This is
No objection, Your Honor.
States Exhibit 102 through 109 inclusive are admitted. They may be published.
I'm just going to leave these up here in case you ever need to refer to them. Actually, I'm going to put them over here. And you can let me know if you need any one of them, okay? There. It's a crowded desk up there, so. I want to go back when we talked about the cause of death. You determined that it was starvation, correct?
Correct.
I want to talk about starvation just generally. Are there different types of starvation? Meaning the duration in which the starvation occurs.
There are different types as far as duration as well as causation.
Okay.
Yes.
So I want to talk about the duration of the starvation first. Is there a distinction between maybe like an acute versus a chronic starvation?
Yes.
And do those have potentially different findings?
Yes.
And what might some of those things be?
Well, firstly, it'd probably be easier to kind of think about acute versus chronic starvation. Chronic starvation would be most classically the starved children that we often see on television when we refer to famines, right? Usually in Ethiopia or Sudan, these chronically malnourished children who have likely been malnourished since birth. That would be our chronic starvation. Our more acute starvation, the easiest way to think of that might be someone who goes on a hunger strike and just stops eating for a period of time. And what we know is that the findings that we can see, both the clinical findings and autopsy findings, can be different. When we have a chronic starvation case, say chronic malnourishment, oftentimes there's they're receiving some nutrition, but not enough. So you might hear terms like marasmus or kwashiorkor, and these refer to the types of nutrients that they may or may not be getting, and the types of findings, say that big distended belly that you might see, versus in, say, a more acute starvation where we don't have those same findings.
So you mentioned two different types, and I'm not going to even attempt to say the names. But as it relates to the distinction between those, does it relate to the specific type of food that they would be consuming relative to the other food that they might be consuming?
Correct. It refers to the nutrients that they're receiving. Are they receiving proteins and not carbohydrates? Are they receiving carbohydrates and not proteins? Are they receiving vitamins? For instance, many of the malnourished children that we see on television are actually receiving some supplemental nutrients, right? So supplemental vitamins, supplemental feeds. It's not enough for them to gain weight and essentially thrive, but it's enough to kind of keep them alive. But again, you might find these things like fluid in the belly or large livers because they're in this kind of more chronic state.
So as it relates to intake of food, nutrients, and starvation. Does starvation mean the complete cessation or elimination of all food and nutrients?
No.
Why might not that be?
Starvation is essentially the lethal form of being malnourished. So people can be malnourished when they're getting some food, just not enough food for them to, again, maintain the necessary energy requirements that we all have. Just being alive, whether we're active or not, requires energy. Walking, thinking requires energy. And so our bodies have the baseline amount of energy that we need. When we're not receiving that energy and we deplete our stores of energy, that's when we become malnourished. And when that malnourishment becomes lethal, we call that starvation.
So would it be uncommon for a person who is malnourished to be still able to have bowel movements and urinate?
No, that can happen as long as there's some intake.
Can somebody be malnourished to the point of starvation and still been able to urinate and or defecate prior to their death?
Yes.
So I want to go back to Benji, and I'm going to refer to him as Benji. What findings did you make as it relates to his autopsy that ultimately led you to reach the conclusion that the manner of death was homicide and the cause of death was starvation?
Are you referring to those specifically listed in the autopsy report?
So I want to go initially through your autopsy report, and then we can talk about some additional things. So as it relates to the first part of your autopsy, I know there's subparts, but as it relates specifically to the BMI, let's talk about that first. What is BMI?
So BMI refers to body mass index. This is essentially a calculation which uses your height and your weight to see whether or not you're overweight or underweight.
And what was Benji's weight at the time of his death?
28 pounds or 12.77 kilograms.
And that weight, where was it taken at?
Where was it measured?
Yes.
In our office at the time of the examination.
And that weight, what did it include? It might sound silly, but what did that include? Just his body?
So that would be his body and any clothing that he was wearing, and at the time he was wearing a diaper.
Was there a description for the diaper? Was it dirty, soiled?
So the diaper was markedly soiled with both urine and well-formed firm stool.
So the weight that she took included the weight of the diaper that had presumably burned in pieces.
Yes.
And what was Benji's height at the time of his death?
39 inches, which is 99 centimeters.
And so BMI is a calculation based on weight and height, correct?
Correct.
And what was Benji's BMI?
12.9 kilograms per meter squared.
And what's the significance of his BMI at the time of his death?
That BMI is less than the first percentile for the CDC calculation for BMI for children, which would be consistent with malnourishment and starvation.
If you can explain to the jury that below the first percentile, what percentiles are you referring to?
So we've probably all seen that when children are taken to the physician, to a doctor's office or any sort of medical clinic, usually they get a height and a weight. Actually, when we go to the doctor, we get a height and a weight. For children, the physicians will usually plot this on a growth curve to make sure that they're growing appropriately. They're gaining weight as they should, they're growing as they should. They'll also plot the BMI on a BMI scale, much like, the growth scales, to see if they're underweight or overweight, just like our physicians would. So if we go to the doctor and our BMI is too high, we might get that discussion about exercising more and eating less. If our BMI is too low, we might have a different conversation. But again, these percentiles are generated for what is considered a healthy weight for height, is what BMI is, right? And it's looking at how much we should weigh given how tall we are.
And you said he was below the first percentile?
Correct.
And what is that?
So when we look at the percentiles of where people should be with these BMI graphs, right? We have kind of normal rate right in the middle for healthy. And then we can go out percentiles, how many people in the population weigh more and how many weigh less. And the CDC has created these percentiles that say you're taller than 95% of the population, so you would be pretty tall, right? So with BMI, they have the same percentiles, and this would mean, so being less than the first percentile would be that 99% of the population would have a BMI greater than the 12.9 that Benjamin had.
And 99% of the population, is it the full population of the United States?
My apologies. It's the population of children aged 4 years, 10 months. So essentially the peers of that age group.
So over 99% of his peers would have had a greater BMI than him.
Correct.
So moving on to your findings that's in 1A2, where you indicated clinical history of precipitous decrease in body weight 2 months prior to his death. As it relates to Benjamin, in looking at the medical records, were you able to obtain weights for portions of Benji's life?
Yes.
And what would be the purpose of looking at the weights during his lifetime?
So when we're assessing a child's health, just like your physician does when you go to the doctor and you get your height and your weight checked, they check the height and the weight for children. And what we can do is we can plot this on what we call growth curves. These are the CDC growth curves that tell us, is a child growing appropriately? And these are plotted out by percentile, 5th percentile, 50th percentile, right? And if you have children, some parents might want to extrapolate or say, oh, my child's 50th percentile, so maybe they'll be X height when they get older, right? But the reason we use that is because it helps us to helps physicians to see if a child is growing appropriately. So as children grow, they should stay on what we call their growth curve. Sometimes they might go up if they gain a little weight, right? They might go up, and now maybe they are a little bit heavier for their height, but they should essentially stay on their growth curve. When children, what we call, fall off the growth curve, meaning maybe they're at 50th percentile and then all of a sudden they drop to 25th or 10th percentile, this can indicate that something is going on with the child. Perhaps there's an illness or something else, which is why physicians will chart this for children to make sure that they're growing appropriately. So we look at the weights and the heights and we plot them on this growth curve to see, is the child growing appropriately? Are they gaining weight appropriately as they should over their time? And we were able to do that with all of the medical records that we obtained.
And did you distill that information down into a chart?
Yes.
And the chart is based on a table, correct?
Yes.
that chart that you mentioned when we were talking about the autopsy and whether it was complete, is that the chart you were referring to?
When we talked about the autopsy report, yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Dr. Mulligan, I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 110. As it relates to 110, does this appear to be the chart that you completed as it relates to Benji's weight during the period of time of his life based on the records?
Yes.
And I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 111. Is that the chart based on this table?
So this chart is the chart that was included in the autopsy report. This table does have a data point, an additional data point listed that is not on this particular chart.
And forgive me, I may have marked you wrong. Okay. So I'm actually going to mark this one. And as my partner just reminded me, I might be using chart and graph interchangeably. So the record's clear. 110 is the chart, and 111 is the graph. Does it matter?
Only to math. 110 would be a spreadsheet, or
I like that term better.
and 111 would be a graph. Yes.
Okay. And 111, does it include the data point that's in 110?
Yes.
Okay. And do you believe that this would be useful to the jury in understanding your testimony today?
Yes.
Yeah, at this time, the state would move to admit States 110 and 111. The tender to defend for objections.
Your Honor, may I take this witness on board, please?
Yes, ma'am.
So in regards to State's Exhibit 110, which is the chart, you would agree with me that it doesn't contain all the data points. Oh, you've changed it now?
It has to be added at 110.
Okay. But it also is missing, for instance, in the communicator records, there are visits for 10/19/2016, and that's not in your chart, correct?
Correct. It's not in the chart.
And there's a CHOSA ER visit, on 1/11/17, that's not in your chart.
Correct.
And then there is a CHOSA visit on 4/1/2021, that's not in your chart.
So again, I'll say correct that these are not in the chart. I cannot verify these visits because I don't have the record, but these points are not in the chart. If you want me to get the record, I can.
I understand, but they're not on your chart.
They're not on the chart.
Okay. And so if those visits exist in those records, they're not charted here.
Correct.
Okay. And there may be other, like for instance, on November 14th, 2017, he saw a doctor and that's not on your chart, correct?
I'm sorry, what was the date again?
November 14th, 2017.
Correct, there's not a point on the chart.
Your Honor, my objection is just that it's not a full and complete data collection. I'll let the state
May I see
respond.
the exhibits and state you can be responsible?
And Judge, this is based on her review of the records, what she did, what ultimately formed her opinion. And so if she wants to have those records and cross-examine Dr. Molina as it relates to those records and the weights and the significance, and if it changes her opinion, that's subject for cross-examination. But this is the basis of her opinion.
States Exhibit 110 and 111 are admitted.
Hey, Judge. Am I opposed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when talking about the growth charts, again, are we looking at one point in time in particular?
This right here.
Thanks, Tommy. As it relates to the growth chart, are we looking at one point in time in particular?
Well, each point on the growth chart represents one point in time in particular, but when we look at the chart, we're looking at the trend over time, not at any one individual point, but at the trend.
Okay, so each point has a significance, but independently, they are not the formation of your opinion as it relates to whether Benjamin died of starvation.
Correct, it's the trend.
Okay. So when we're looking at the beginning of his life, and I should ask first, the axis here, the vertical axis, what is that charting?
Weight in kilograms.
And then the bottom axis?
That is age in months.
Okay. So these lines, the red line at the very top that's plotted, what does that line indicate?
So that's 95th percentile. You can see the ones that are labeled. This chart is actually based from the CDC data. So that the charts that you see in the doctor's office, you can actually get those data points from the CDC. They're freely available. And so this chart was generated with the CDC data. So the lines, the kind of brown line or red, the green, the blue, the, I guess, darker blue in the middle labeled 50th, the yellow and the orange, those are CDC numbers representing the percentile. So 95th percentile, that would be kind of your heaviest kids, and the 5th percentile would be your lightest children for each age. So the CDC developed those numbers.
Okay. So as it relates to the highest line here, the one that's in the red, labeled the 95th percentile, that means that if you were on the 95th curve, that means that you would be heavier than 95% of the peers in that age group.
Correct.
And then as it relates to the bottom line, the 5th percentile, if you were on the 5th percentile curve, that means that 95% of the people in your age population would be heavier than you.
Correct.
Do you recall what these two lines, and let me ask you about the yellow, what growth curve that is?
25th percentile.
Okay. Now these light blue dots that are kind of scattered throughout the State's Exhibit 111, what do those indicate?
Those are the weights from the medical records for Benjamin Cervera.
Okay. And so looking at from 0 months to just past 21 months, generally, is he following that 5th percentile curve?
Yes.
So in your opinion, is he developing appropriately as it relates to his weight during that period of time?
Well, you can see he's following the curve nicely initially, but then he kind of falls off the curve a little bit, and then he goes back onto the curve. So likely something happened around 8 to 10 months, but then he goes back onto the curve.
And that jump down is what I'm pointing to right here in State's Exhibit 111?
Correct.
And then we're back on around the 5th percentile curve after that?
Correct.
So this period of time between 21 months and 40 months, based on your review of the records, you didn't find any weight plots during that period of time.
Correct. I couldn't find any medical records during that time.
So during this period of time, are you going to make any assumptions as it relates to whether Benji was on the 5th percentile, 25th percentile, anything like that?
No.
When the next data point that you have at around the time that Benji is 40 months, is he on a different curve?
Yes.
And what curve does he jump to?
The 25th percentile.
Okay. And did that trend continue to the next plot point?
Yes.
And that plot point, I don't know if I can do the chart.
It's about 48 months.
Okay. So that's 4 years old.
Correct.
So we have from 48 months up until the time that he ultimately is, actually this last data point here is at the time of his death.
Correct.
So from 48 months to just before his death at 54 months?
58 months.
58 months. Does he ever gain weight during this period of time?
No.
And
Not by trend.
not by trend. Again, the trend being from this point here at 48 months to ultimately his demise at 58 months.
Correct.
So during this 10-month period of time, his overall trend is downwards.
Correct.
And during this 10 months of his life, if he's following his growth curve, if he's developing appropriately, would you have expected him to continue to gain weight?
Yes.
So, in looking at his death at approximately 58 months, if he would have stayed on the 25th percentile curve, how much should he have weighed?
Approximately 16.5 and change kilograms.
I know we're a math major, but I'm not expecting you to do it on the spot, but 16 and a half roughly. Correct?
Correct.
And how much, again, was he in kilograms at the time of his death?
12.7.
So that's a difference of 4
Essentially like 4 kilograms.
roughly 4 kilograms. And what's kilograms to pounds?
Of course, that's about 10 pounds.
Okay. 10 pounds in a child at 58 months old. Does that have any significance to you?
Well, Benjamin's weight in pounds at the death was 28 pounds, so 10 pounds is essentially a little less than half of his weight.
Okay. So percentile-wise, that's a large percent of his body.
Correct.
So it might seem silly, but 10 pounds for me is different than 10 pounds for Benji.
Correct.
So when you were looking at this trend over time, did you also look at his height over this period of time?
Yes.
And when you look at his height, did you notice any trends?
The trend was no growth. That essentially there was no growth from about 48 months to 58 months. The values are a little more spurious, meaning it's not straight at no growth. Sometimes he's actually measured as shorter. Children don't usually shrink, but our measurements can be off. But essentially from 48 months to 58 months, the growth is stagnant at about 99 centimeters.
And as it relates to height, especially when talking about children, would you expect there be some reliability issues as it relates to those measurements?
Yes.
Why is that?
Often when children are alive, they don't necessarily participate as well for the height. There can be some differences if they don't have their legs straight and their knees are bent. It depends on how you're measuring the height versus just estimating the height. But again, children don't usually shrink, or adults may as we get older, but children don't. They grow. And so if we look at those values, again, pretty much it's about consistent at about 99 centimeters with some variation that's likely just due to human error with measurement.
So that period of time between 48 months where his height was measured at 99 and his ultimate death where you measured him at autopsy at 99, would you expected his height to grow?
Yes, he should have grown in those 10 months.
And is that instructive as it relates to your ultimate opinion as to whether Benji died from starvation?
Yes.
How so?
Again, children should grow. So it's not just a matter of losing weight, it's a matter of not growing. So we have to take both of those into consideration. When looking at adults and assessing starvation, we can look purely at weight loss. But when looking at children, it's not just about weight loss, it's failure to grow.
So does this failure to grow, does it have any medical term that might be used in the medical community?
Some people use the term stunting or arrest, meaning you've kind of stopped, as well as we've discussed, falling off the curve.
Okay. As it relates to stunting, other than the height, was there any evidence that you found related to his inability to grow in height?
At the time of autopsy, no.
Okay. I want to talk about the next finding that you made as it relates to evidence of starvation being a clinical history of low protein and obesity. Talking about, let's talk about low protein at first. Where did you get that value from?
Those values are at the terminal admission or the terminal treatment, meaning Benjamin had an arrest at home and was taken to the hospital, and those hospital records, they did some blood tests at the hospital, and so that's where those values came from.
I didn't have to ask you about this, and I'm sorry to break this up a little bit, but I want to go back to the height. So, not being able to rely on the height, does that mean that would affect your ability to rely on his BMI as well?
Yes.
Okay. Is that the reason you didn't graph his height and his BMI?
Correct.
Going back to the low protein, that last visit where his low protein, where he had low clinical protein, do you know the source of that value, meaning how the value was obtained?
I do not.
Okay. Was it evident within the medical records?
No.
Okay. And what does the low protein mean as it relates to starvation?
So, when we are malnourished and we're not getting enough energy intake, our body will first start to utilize our fat for energy, right? When we don't have enough fat, it'll start to use protein for energy. And when we run out of both, that's when or we get low on both, serious complications can occur. So that can be we have low protein because we've broken down a lot of our protein, but it also can be we have low protein because we're not eating enough protein, because that's where our protein reserves come from.
And albumin, what's albumin?
Albumin is the main protein. So essentially, these are kind of measures together that we don't have enough proteins.
Next I want to talk about is the evidence of starvation C, paucity of abdominal adipose tissue. What does paucity mean?
Paucity means lack of, very little.
Okay. And what is adipose tissue?
Adipose tissue is fat.
And what, as it relates to binging, in particular as it relates to the autopsies, what did you notice about the fat around his belly?
So in the abdomen, we actually have two main kind of fat stores. One being what we call subcutaneous, and that's the fat that's right under our skin, right? And that's kind of our insulation fat, right? And at autopsy in Benjamin's case, this was very, very thin, right? So it's just a very thin amount of subcutaneous fat, right? But also in our abdomen, we have fat that surrounds our intestines. It's in our mesentery, it's protective fat to protect our intestines and help to, there's kind of a thin mesh that anchors our intestines, and this fat serves as a protector for that mesh. And in Benjamin's case, there actually was no fat left in the mesentery at all.
Okay. And so how did that look?
So it's described in the report as translucent, meaning this thin membrane that should be fatty, you can actually see right through because there's no fat there.
As it relates to the subcutaneous fat, was it measured, like the thickness?
Yes,
And what was the thickness?
3 millimeters.
Okay. For us Americans who use the inches empirical system, what's a correlation roughly between like a centimeter and an inch?
Less than 1/4 of an inch.
Okay.
Probably like less than 1/8 of an inch.
1 centimeter is less than 1/8 of an inch.
Oh, I'm sorry, 1 centimeter is if we're doing 1 centimeter, sorry. 2.5. It's, what a centimeter is, so half inch is 1 foot. So, 2.5, so I apologize. 2.5, so half an inch is 1.25. So 1 centimeter is less than a half an inch.
Okay. And there are 10 millimeters per centimeter?
Correct.
Okay. So that's like 1/10 of 1/2 of an inch. Or 3/10 of 1/2 of an inch.
We're less than an eighth of an inch.
Okay. Is there any kind of general consensus as it relates to what like a normal level of that subcutaneous fat should be?
From experience, I can tell you in most children, it's usually at least a centimeter.
Okay. And there's 10 centimeters, is there 10 millimeters per centimeter?
Correct.
Next I want to go to is that the investigation reveals intentional deprivation of food by caregiver. Were you able to review some videos as it relates to Benji prior to this death?
Yes.
me ask first, this intentional deprivation by the caregivers, did it assist in informing your opinion as it relates to cause versus manner?
So that does not affect cause, that it goes to manner of death.
Okay, so this intentional deprivation wouldn't affect your ultimate conclusion that Benji died from starvation.
Correct.
So I'm going to show you what's already been admitted as State's Exhibit number 75. And I'm going to play for you number 7. If you could read for me, when was, can you see from there? What date was video?
Yes, please do. Just please keep your voice up.
What date was video number 7 created?
August 17th, 2021.
Okay. And are you aware of the date of Benjamin's death?
Yes,
So what was the date of death?
August 17th, 2021.
So fair to say that this video was created the same day that he died.
It appears that way, yes.
Sit down now. Sit back now.
As it relates to that video number 7 and State's Exhibit number 75, was this the same type of videos that you reviewed and ultimately informing your opinion as to whether there was intentional deprivation of food by the caregiver?
Yes, that and others.
And there were a number of videos that you reviewed, correct?
Yes.
I want to talk about the intestines as well. During the autopsy, did you observe Benji's stomach, small intestine, large intestine, and colon?
Stomach, small intestine, large intestine, and
Colon?
the colon is the large intestine.
So you're the doctor.
So yes.
So as it relates to his intestines, did you make any observations that inform your opinion as to whether Benji died from starvation?
Yes.
And what was that?
His stomach contained a minimal amount of material, approximately 15 cc's of clear fluid with this yellow and black particulate material reminiscent of like small seeds. And his small and large intestines were collapsed with minimal contents.
What does that mean? What's the clinical significance of the collapsed intestines?
That means there's no, so normally when we eat, food is first processed from our stomach, then it goes into our small intestine and into our large intestine. This is incredibly variable, but in general, small intestine might have, contents in it from what you've eaten kind of that day. whereas your large intestine might have contents in it from the day before or even a couple days before, just depending on how quickly an individual processes their food. So this would tell me there's minimal contents, so likely there hadn't been any intake of food or significant amount of food within at least, say, a day prior to death. There was, again, stool in the diaper, which may have been from days prior, but nothing throughout the intestinal tract.
During a medical treatment intervention around August 17th of 2021, as part of the life-saving, attempted life-saving measures, was an NG tube put in place?
Yes.
And what is an NG tube?
It's a tube that goes in someone's nose, down the esophagus into their stomach. So it's nasogastric tube.
And what was that NG tube used for?
It's commonly placed in life-saving measures. In this particular case, I believe it was placed because the physicians noted some abdominal distension with the life-saving measures, including trying to breathe for the child. Sometimes what will happen is air will go into the intestine and cause distension, so they'll put in the tube to try to decompress that or give the airway out.
And did they use suction in this case?
I do not recall.
If they had used suction and removed some of the contents, what type of debris, based on the size of the NG tube, would they be able to remove?
NG tubes are small, they have very small holes, so they can remove mostly liquid and small particulate material. They can't remove larger items.
So even if they had used the NG tube and used suction, would that have changed your opinion as it relates to the content in the small intestine and large intestine? Or lack of content in the small intestines and large intestine?
No, NG tubes can only remove content from the stomach.
Did you recover the contents of Benji's stomach at the time of autopsy?
Yes,
And did you photograph those?
yes.
I'm going to show you,
Mr. Julia, is this a good, are you getting the photographs?
I think after I finish just this set of photos, it'd be a good time to break. I'm going to show you what's marked as States Exhibit 112 through 120. You look at those. To States Exhibits 112 through 120 reflect, all of these reflect the photographs you took of the stomach contents that you recovered at autopsy on around August 18th of 2021.
Correct.
And do they truly and accurately depict the stomach contents?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time the state would move to States 112 through 120. Under tender defense for objection to any as previously tendered in discovery.
No objection. Case Exhibit 112 through 120 inclusive are admitted, and they may be published.
And then this is the last thing I think we're going to do today is just look at the photos, okay? I'm going to show you what's been admitted as States Exhibit 113. You describe the contents as like seed-like material.
Yes. In the report, it's described as yellow and black particulate material.
How long have you been in San Antonio?
More than 20 years.
Okay. Have you had chips and salsa before?
Yes.
Okay. Does this look consistent with anything?
Objection, Your Honor. I'm gonna, unless this has been tested, should not, may I take her on what I heard before we get into whether she thinks it is something or not?
I'm gonna go and sustain the objection unless you can lay prejudice to that it's something more than speculation.
Okay. So, did you test this material?
No.
Okay. Did you receive information during your investigation as it relates to what Benji may have been fed during certain periods of
And
time?
Your Honor, can we approach?
The attention that you have given today. Thank you for working a little late. Please remember, it is expected tomorrow that we are going to work a half day. I do have a Veterans Treatment Court docket. So because of that, I am going to ask you to come in at 9 in the morning tomorrow so we can get some testimony done and finish with this witness. And like I said, it will we'll be recessing the trial around noon. Please remember my instructions. Do not look up or research anything about this case or anything you may have heard during the course of the trial. Do not read or listen to any media accounts of the trial or speak to anyone who may have watched these media accounts. Do not read or engage with any online comments that may be associated with this trial, and do not speak to anyone about the case or the evidence you have seen or heard, including other members of the jury. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Please be safe. We'll see you at 9 o'clock tomorrow. Thank you.